The sun rose over Earth, casting golden rays across the vast cities, the bustling streets, and the vast fields. People woke up to the familiar hum of their daily lives, unknowing that their world was about to change forever. Across the planet, life seemed to be flourishing. Cities buzzed with activity, engineers were working on groundbreaking projects, and scientists were making new discoveries about the world and the universe. Technology had advanced to a point where artificial intelligence, advanced robotics, and space exploration were no longer dreams. They were realities. The human race had become a force to be reckoned with their influence expanding beyond Earth's atmosphere. But none of this mattered to the Galactic Empire, which had been watching from afar. High above Earth, in the cold vastness of space, a small group of alien ships hovered in the dark, hidden by their advanced cloaking devices. The Galactic Empire had been keeping a close eye on humanity's rapid technological advancements, something that had alarmed them greatly. The Empire's leaders feared the humans, with their boundless potential and insatiable curiosity, might one day challenge their authority and pose a threat to their control over the galaxy. Their fear was not unwarranted. The humans had already begun to explore space, developing faster than light travel, and their military technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate. It was only a matter of time before they became a real danger to the Empire's dominance. The decision was made in the cold chambers of the Empire's War Council. Earth needed to be neutralized, not through a traditional invasion, but with something far more sinister. The Empire had long ago developed the ultimate weapon, genetically engineered mutant orbeasts, creatures designed for one purpose: destruction. These beasts were massive, terrifying, and nearly indestructible. They could tear through cities, crush entire armies, and cause mass chaos in ways that no conventional weapon could. The orders were clear. The war beasts would be dropped onto Earth. It was a covert strike, meant to catch the humans off guard. The Galactic Empire's forces, cloaked and hidden in deep space, began their journey towards Earth. But as the ships approached the planet, something unexpected happened. Down below, a lone astronaut stationed at a deep space observatory was scanning the skies, monitoring space traffic. He had no idea that this seemingly routine task would lead to the discovery of a threat unlike anything Earth had ever faced. His instruments beeped erratically as a strange energy pulse appeared on his radar. At first, it was subtle, just a flicker on the screen. But as he focused his attention on the anomaly, it grew stronger. His heart began to race as the signal became more defined. He quickly realized that it wasn't a typical space phenomenon. This was something purposeful, something deliberate. His first instinct was to send a warning, but as he prepared to make the transmission, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The pulse wasn't coming from a natural source. It was coming from somewhere deep in space, somewhere far beyond any known territory. He immediately began to scan for more information, but his systems were overwhelmed with a surge of interference. Whatever was coming, it was being cloaked. The pulse was a signal, a warning of the invasion to come. In the cold expanse of space, the cloaked ships of the Galactic Empire were closing in on Earth. Inside their heavily fortified command center, the Empire's generals were watching with cold, calculating eyes. They knew that Earth's defenses, while impressive, were no match for the warbeasts they had unleashed. The creatures were unstoppable. No army, no technology, nothing could stand in their way. It was the perfect plan, one that would ensure humanity's extinction without the Empire ever having to expose itself. Back on Earth, the first signs of the invasion were met with confusion. The astronaut, now in full panic mode, tried desperately to send out a warning. But before he could relay any information, something catastrophic happened. A powerful shockwave, unlike anything he had ever felt, struck his observatory. The station shook violently, and the lights flickered. He looked out the window just in time to see his satellite array disintegrate in a burst of energy. A wave of heat and energy engulfed the station, knocking out power and communications. The astronaut's screen went blank, his instruments fried beyond repair. He was left in the dark, unable to warn Earth of the incoming disaster. The shockwave had been just the first sign. Something much larger was coming, and it was only a matter of time before the planet would feel its full force. Below, on Earth's surface, no one was aware of the destruction taking place above. People went about their day, working, studying, relaxing. Life went on as usual, but the atmosphere had already begun to tear apart. High above, the cloaked ships dropped their payload. The war beasts, monstrous creatures that were engineered for one thing, destruction, were released into the Earth's atmosphere. They fell like meteors, crashing into cities, forests, and oceans. The first sign of their arrival was a strange tremor that shook the ground. Buildings swayed, and windows shattered. At first, people thought it was an earthquake, but the tremors only intensified. The sky darkened as the alien ships finally decloaked, revealing their true nature. From the sky, enormous creatures, mutant war beasts, descended onto Earth. They were everything the Galactic Empire had promised. Terrifying, massive, and relentless. The war beasts immediately began to wreak havoc. They were not just animals. They were living weapons, designed to kill and destroy without mercy. Their claws ripped through steel and concrete, their teeth shattered walls, and their roars filled the air as they tore through anything in their path. Earth's defense systems were no match for the creatures. The military scrambled to respond, but they were overwhelmed from the start. Captain Benner, a seasoned military officer, was one of the first to witness the chaos. He had been in charge of Earth's new defense initiative, designed to protect the planet from alien threats. But even with all their advanced technology, Earth was ill-prepared for this kind of attack. The war beasts were too powerful, too fast, and too deadly. Benner's team was one of the first units deployed to fight back. They fired everything they had: missiles, energy weapons, and even experimental drones. But nothing worked. The war beasts shrugged off their attacks as if they were nothing more than insects swatting at them. The city was in ruins, and the human forces were in full retreat. It seemed that all hope was lost. But then, a faint signal came through the chaos. A message from the astronaut. His transmission had been weak, but it was enough to be decoded by Earth's military command. The message revealed the truth. The creatures were not just random aliens. They were controlled by a far more dangerous force, the Galactic Empire. And worse, this was just the beginning. The Empire's fleet was approaching Earth, hidden in the depths of space. The war beasts were merely the first wave. The Empire's ultimate goal was the complete destruction of Earth, to eliminate humanity before they could become a threat to their reign. The message sent shockwaves through the command centers on Earth. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Humanity was under attack by an enemy they couldn't see, and they had no idea how to stop it. As the first wave of war beasts continued their rampage, humanity's defenses were crumbling. Cities were burning, military bases were falling, and the very foundation of Earth's civilization was being destroyed. The planet's inhabitants were being pushed to the brink of annihilation, and there was no hope in sight. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a glimmer of something else, something that humans had in abundance: determination. Captain Benner, now realizing the true nature of the threat, gathered his team for one final stand. They would not go down without a fight. But as they prepared for the inevitable battle, they knew that it would take everything they had, and more, to defeat the invaders. The war beasts were only the beginning. And as the sky above Earth continued to tear apart, signaling the arrival of even more destruction, one question remained: would humanity survive this onslaught, or would this be the end of their story? The story had only just begun, but the stakes were higher than ever before. The atmosphere over Earth had become increasingly unstable. As the cloaked ships of the Galactic Empire descended upon the planet, their massive forms remained hidden from human eyes, invisible to all the monitoring systems on Earth. High above the clouds, the ships glided silently, a silent harbinger of destruction. It was only when the ships reached the upper layers of the atmosphere that their cloaking technology began to fail, revealing their true nature. Massive and imposing, the fleet hovered ominously over Earth, like vultures preparing to strike. "Oh, how tragic," Zahara said, her skin flickering between yellow and pink. "But you're alive, and that's what matters. Come, Elliot, let me take care of you." Before he could protest, Zahara draped the blanket over his shoulders and handed him the tray of glowing treats. Elliot stared at the food, which wriggled slightly on the plate. "What is this?" he asked, poking it with a finger. "Only my finest delicacies," Zahara said proudly. "It's a traditional dish of my people, very nutritious and full of energy." Elliot sniffed it cautiously. It smelled like burnt rubber mixed with something sweet. Thanks, but I think I'll pass for now." Zahara's skin dimmed slightly, but she quickly recovered. "No matter. You must be exhausted. Come, let's get you inside." Elliot followed her, stumbling slightly as he walked. His head was pounding, and his legs felt like jelly, but he couldn't help staring at the strange alien woman leading him. She moved with a graceful confidence, her multiple arms carrying the lantern and tray with ease. Her glowing skin was mesmerizing, shifting between colors like a living rainbow. When they reached the mansion, Elliot stopped in his tracks. "This is your house?" he asked, his voice filled with awe. "Yes," Zahara said, beaming with pride. "It's been in my family for generations. I've worked hard to keep it in perfect condition, even though I'm the only one left." The mansion was enormous, with towering spires, intricate carvings, and windows that shimmered like crystals. It looked both ancient and otherworldly, a place that belonged in a fairy tale. "Wow," Elliot muttered, stepping inside. The interior was just as impressive. The floors were polished to a mirror-like shine. The walls were adorned with alien artwork, and the air smelled faintly of flowers. It was almost too perfect, like a museum. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Zahara said, guiding him to a plush chair. "Can I get you anything? Water? Tea? A warm towel for your head injury?" Elliot hesitated. This was not what he had expected when his ship went down. He had imagined dying in the cold emptiness of space, not being rescued by a strange but oddly kind alien housewife. "Water would be great," he said finally. Zahara clapped her hands, her skin glowing bright pink. "Of course. One moment." As she disappeared into another room, Elliot leaned back in the chair and exhaled. His head was spinning, and his body ached all over, but for the first time in hours, he felt a small sense of relief. When Zahara returned, she carried a glass of water in one hand and a small bowl of alien fruit in another. She set them on the table in front of him, her eyes shimmering with excitement. "Elliot," she began, sitting across from him, "I know this must all be very overwhelming for you, but I must say, I'm so glad you're here." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You are?" "Yes," Zahara said earnestly. "I've been alone for so long. Decades, maybe even centuries. I stopped counting after the first 100 years. Elliot blinked. "Centuries? How old are you?" "Oh, not too old for my species," Zahara said with a wave of her hand. "But that's not important. What matters is that you're here, a human, a real, living human. I've dreamed of this day for so long." Elliot shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Thanks, I guess." Captain Darius Kane was no stranger to strange situations. As a soldier in the Terran Armed Forces, he had spent years patrolling the far edges of the galaxy. He had fought alien creatures, survived brutal battles, and witnessed breathtaking sights among the stars. Yet nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. He stood at attention on the barren surface of Torvac 7, a remote planet where two opposing armies, the humans and the Thralca Dominion, had come together to negotiate a fragile truce. The battlefield that had been alive with explosions and death just days ago, was now eerily silent. Darius could still smell the faint trace of ash in the air and feel the tension hanging over the makeshift meeting ground. Across from him stood Princess Zolveris, the heir to the Thralca Dominion. She was nothing like the aliens he had fought against during the war. Her appearance was otherworldly, almost mesmerizing. Her silver skin shimmered faintly under the twin moons of Torvac 7, and her violet eyes glowed softly, like distant stars. She stood tall, at least a head taller than Darius, and moved with a grace that seemed unnatural. Her ceremonial robes, adorned with intricate patterns of light, made her look like a living piece of art. Darius wasn't exactly sure why he had been chosen to represent humanity in this meeting. He was no diplomat. He was a soldier, a man of action, not words. Still, orders were orders. When his commanding officer told him to stand guard and assist during the negotiations, he didn't question it. But this was something else entirely. "I offer you my hand, Captain Kane," Princess Zolveris said suddenly, her melodic voice cutting through the silence. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. Darius blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "I'm sorry, Your Highness. Did you say your hand?" "Yes," she said with perfect clarity. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. "I am proposing a union between us, a marriage." For a moment, Darius thought the translator device in his earpiece might have malfunctioned. He stared at her, dumbfounded, his brain struggling to catch up with the words she had just spoken. "A marriage." He repeated, as if saying it aloud might help him understand. "Yes, Captain," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "A bond between you and me. A union that would symbolize the alliance between humanity and the Thralca Dominion. Together, we could end this war permanently and build a future of peace." The weight of her words sank in, and Darius felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. He had faced terrifying creatures, navigated dangerous terrain, and even stared death in the face. But nothing had ever made him feel as unsteady as this moment. He was just a soldier, a grunt in the larger machine of humanity's military efforts. And now, out of nowhere, this alien princess was asking him to marry her. It felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare. "Your Highness," Darius said carefully, trying to find the right words. "I don't think I'm the right person for this." Princess Zalveris tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. "And why is that, Captain Kane?" she asked, her voice as smooth as silk. He hesitated, unsure how to explain himself without sounding disrespectful. "Well, for starters, I'm just a soldier. I fight in battles. I follow orders. I don't know anything about royal politics or ruling or marriage, for that matter." Her lips curved into a faint smile, as though she found his honesty amusing. "That is precisely why I chose you." Darius blinked again, feeling more confused than ever. "I don't follow." "I have watched you, Captain," she said, her voice lowering slightly. "I have seen your bravery on the battlefield, your sense of honor, your loyalty to your comrades, your willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. These are qualities I admire deeply. They are qualities my people respect. You are not just a soldier, Darius Kane. You are a symbol of what humanity could be, a bridge between our worlds." Her words carried a weight that made Darius' chest tighten. He wasn't used to being praised like this, especially not by someone so regal. Most of the time, his job involved following orders, keeping his head down, and surviving to see another day. He had never thought of himself as anything more than a small cog in the massive machine of war. "Look, Princess," he said after a moment, trying to keep his tone respectful. "I appreciate the compliment, but I think you might have the wrong idea about me. I'm not a leader or a hero or anything like that. I'm just a guy doing his job." Zalveris' expression didn't change. If anything, she seemed even more determined. "You sell yourself short, Captain. That humility is part of what makes you worthy." Darius opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. What could he possibly say to that? The entire situation felt surreal, like something out of a holodrama. He half expected someone to step in and tell him it was all a joke. But no one did. The princess was serious. She extended her hand toward him, her 6 long fingers outstretched in a gesture that felt both alien and familiar. "Marry me, Captain Kane," she said again, her voice soft but commanding. "Together, we can change the fate of our people." The moons above cast a silvery glow over the scene, making her look almost ethereal. For a brief moment, Darius felt like he was standing on the edge of something monumental, something that could alter the course of history. But that was just it. He wasn't the kind of man who changed history. He was just Darius Kane, a soldier who had signed up to protect his people, not to marry an alien princess and forge a galaxy-wide alliance. "I don't think I can do that," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. The princess raised an eyebrow, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. "And why not?" Darius took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "Because it's not who I am, Your Highness. I'm not a prince or a diplomat or a symbol of unity. I'm just a man who knows how to fight. And honestly, I don't think I'd survive a week in your world." For the first time, Zolvera's confident expression faltered. It was brief, barely noticeable, but Darius saw it. There was a flicker of something, disappointment, maybe even sadness, in her eyes before she composed herself again. "I see," she said softly. "You are afraid." Darius shook his head quickly. "No, it's not that. I'm not afraid of you, or your people, or the idea of peace. It's just, I don't belong in your world. You deserve someone who understands what it means to be a ruler, someone who can stand by your side and help you lead. That's not me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the wind sweeping across the barren plains of Torvac 7. Finally, Princess Zolveris lowered her hand, her expression unreadable. "You are an unusual man, Captain Kane. Most would have accepted my proposal without hesitation, either out of ambition or fear. But you are different." Darius wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but he nodded anyway. "Thank you, Your Highness." The princess turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the twin moons hummed low in the sky. "Perhaps I misjudged you," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Or perhaps you are exactly who I thought you were." Darius didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed silent. All he knew was that this was the strangest day of his life, and it wasn't over yet. Captain Darius Kane stood motionless for a long moment, the weight of Princess Zolvera's words pressing down on him like gravity. He had faced countless challenges in his military career, ambushes, endless battles, and grueling decisions, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield he could navigate with his training or his weapons. This was something far more personal. "I can't do this, Your Highness," he said finally, his voice steady but low. He wasn't angry or defiant. If anything, he sounded tired. "Why?" Zolveris asked, taking the small step closer to him. Her tall frame cast a shadow over him, but her tone wasn't harsh or demanding. It was curious, even gentle. "Why can't you accept? Is it fear, or is there something more?" Darius met her violet gaze, forcing himself to stay calm. He had to tread carefully. The last thing he wanted was to offend an alien princess, especially one who could influence the future of human-Thralcan relations. "It's not fear," he said. "It's who I am." "And who are you, Captain Kane?" Zolveris asked, her head tilting slightly to the side. She looked genuinely interested, as though peeling back the layers of his identity was a puzzle she wanted to solve. Darius let out a small, bitter chuckle. "I'm a soldier, princess. That's all I've ever been. I signed up to fight for humanity, to protect my people from threats like the Dominion. And now, here I am, standing on the same ground as the enemy I've spent years fighting. It's surreal, but it doesn't change who I am. I don't belong in your world. I don't belong anywhere near a throne. Zalveris studied him, her expression thoughtful. A soldier's life is a noble one, she said after a moment. But is that truly all you are? Just a man who fights and follows orders? Darius frowned, unsure how to answer. It's not just about fighting. It's about protecting. My job is to make sure the people I care about are safe, to stand on the front lines so they don't have to. That's what being the soldier means to me. And that's where I belong. On the battlefield, not in some royal court. The princess's gaze softened slightly. You speak with great conviction, Captain. But don't you see? What I'm offering you is not just a union between us. It's a chance to protect both our peoples. A chance to bring peace to the galaxy. Isn't that worth stepping off the battlefield for? Darius shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms over his chest. Maybe it is, but peace doesn't come from just signing papers or making promises. It's fragile, Your Highness. One wrong step, one misunderstanding, and it falls apart. I don't think I'm the kind of man who can hold it together. I just get in the way. Zalveris frowned, her lips pressing into a thin line. You underestimate yourself, Captain Kane. Your humility is admirable, but it blinds you to your true potential. Darius shook his head, letting out a frustrated sigh. It's not humility. It's reality. I know my limits. I'm not some great leader or strategist. I'm just a guy who knows how to survive. You need someone who can help you navigate politics, who can stand by your side and understand what it means to rule. That's not me. The wind stirred around them, carrying with it the faint hum of distant machinery from the human base nearby. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Then Zalveris broke the quiet. Do you think I am so blind to what you are, Captain Kane? Do you believe I chose you without understanding what it means to be a soldier? Darius glanced at her, unsure how to respond. I have seen you on the battlefield, she continued. Her voice was softer now, almost reflective. I have seen the way you fight, not with hatred, but with purpose. You do not kill for glory or revenge. You fight to protect. That is a rare quality, even among my own people. It is why I respect you, and it is why I believe you are worthy of this bond. Darius felt a pang of guilt at her words. She was giving him so much credit, painting him as some kind of noble figure when all he felt was exhaustion. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even sure he believed in the kind of peace she was talking about. Look, Princess, he said finally, rubbing the back of his neck. I appreciate what you're saying. Really, I do. But it's not that simple. Marrying you, stepping into your world, it would mean leaving everything I know behind. My comrades, my mission, my home. I spent my whole life as a soldier. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. Without that, I'm not sure I'd even know how to exist. Zalveris gave him a long, searching look. Is it truly who you are, or is it who you've been told to be? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Darius opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. He had never thought about it that way before. Being a soldier had always felt like his purpose, his calling. But was it really, or had he simply followed the path laid out for him, because it was the only one he knew? I don't know, he admitted quietly, his voice barely audible over the wind. Zalveris nodded, as though she had expected that answer. Perhaps that is something you should consider, Captain Kane. You speak of duty, of protecting your people, but perhaps your duty is greater than you realize. Perhaps it extends beyond the battlefield, beyond the limits of what you think you are capable of. Zalveris looked at him with a mixture of admiration and sadness. And yet, Captain, you've already done more than most of your kind could ever imagine. You've fought alongside us in this war, seen our struggles, and helped us fight for survival. You don't see it, but you've already begun the first steps of understanding. Perhaps it's time to take the next step. Darius stepped back, turning to gaze at the barren landscape, his boots crunching softly on the rocky ground. It's easy to say that, Princess, when you're standing here with the power of a whole empire behind you? What do I have? A rifle and a uniform. A soldier's life. You have more than that, she said quietly, her voice almost like a whisper. You have the heart of someone who fights for what's right. I can see it in your eyes. You fight not for glory, but for the people you protect. That's what makes you different. Her words struck him harder than he expected. He had never thought of himself as anything special. Just a soldier. He had signed up for this life because it was the only thing he was good at. It was the only thing he could do. But Zalveris was right. He did fight for something. He fought for people, for families, for the future. He had never stopped to think about what that future could be beyond the next battle. I never asked for this, Darius muttered, half to himself. This life. The war. The decisions. None of it. It was never supposed to be like this. Zalveris stood silently beside him, her gaze distant. No, it wasn't. But here we are, Captain. Here we are, standing at the crossroads of history. Our people, both of our peoples, are at a tipping point. The war is exhausting us all. And sometimes, the only way to move forward is to take a step that feels impossible. Darius turned back to face her, his eyes narrowing. And that step, you think, is me marrying you? Yes, she replied without hesitation. But not just for political reasons, not just for peace, for something bigger than both of us. Darius felt the weight of her words press on his chest. He had heard the stories, the legends of kings and queens, heroes and villains. He had seen the consequences of failed peace treaties, of leaders who had sought power for the wrong reasons. But this wasn't a story. This was real. And it wasn't just about him anymore. I'm not the hero you think I am, Darius said, shaking his head. I don't even know how to begin to be the kind of man who could stand beside you in something like this. Zalveris placed a hand on his arm, her touch cool but firm. You don't need to be a hero. You need to be true to yourself. I can see it, Captain. I can see the strength in you. Not just on the battlefield, but in your heart. That's what I need. Darius swallowed hard, his throat tightening. There it was again, her unwavering belief in him, the way she saw something in him that he didn't even see in himself. But there was one thing he knew for sure. He couldn't walk away from everything he had ever known. He couldn't become someone he wasn't. Not for her. Not for anyone. I'm sorry, Princess, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I can't be that man. Zalveris didn't pull away. She stood by his side, her presence as strong as ever. I understand, Captain. I truly do. You've made your decision. Maybe not, Darius said quietly, his gaze distant as he looked out across the barren landscape. Maybe I'm just not ready yet, but one thing's for sure. I don't want this war to keep going, and I don't want anyone else to suffer because of it. Zalveris watched him carefully, her eyes sharp as she assessed him. Then take your time, Captain. No decision is ever easy, but don't let fear of what you cannot control hold you back. There's a future out there. Maybe not the one you expected, but one that is worth fighting for. Darius didn't answer right away. Instead, he gazed at the horizon, where the twin moons were now high in the sky. His heart was torn between the duty he had always known and the possibility of something more. He wasn't ready to make a decision yet, but one thing was clear. This was a crossroads, and the path ahead would change everything. The days after their conversation had passed in a blur for Captain Darius Kane. He could hardly sleep, could hardly focus on anything except the weight of the decision that now loomed over him. The cold walls of his quarters in the human base felt heavier than usual, as though they were closing in on him, trapping him in a life he wasn't sure he could keep living. His mind wandered back to the night he had spent talking with Princess Zalveris. Her words echoed in his thoughts. You fight not for glory, but for the people you protect. For so long, Darius had defined himself as a soldier, a protector of humanity, someone who fought for the safety of the weak and the innocent. It was his job, his purpose. But with Zalveris' offer still hanging in the air, he found himself questioning the narrow view he had always held. Could he be more than just a soldier? Could he, in some way, help secure peace between their worlds? Or was he destined to live and die by the battlefield? Every time he thought he had the answer, something inside him, something deep, would shift. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. But was he ready to leave behind everything he knew for something he didn't fully understand? As he sat at the small table in his quarters, the sun setting outside, Darius stared down at the letter in his hand. It was a simple message from Zalveris, asking him to meet her again. The ink was fresh, the words carefully chosen, but no matter how many times he read it, the meaning remained the same. She was giving him another chance to consider her offer. With a deep sigh, Darius crumpled the paper in his fist and tossed it aside. It wasn't the message that bothered him. It was the uncertainty it brought. The decision weighed on him like an anchor, pulling him in 1,000 directions, none of them clear. Later that evening, Darius made his way to the meeting spot, an open clearing near the base, not far from where they had spoken before. The distant hum of machinery and the buzz of voices were barely audible here. This part of the planet had an eerie stillness to it, a strange kind of peace that seemed to mock the turmoil inside him. Princess Zalveris was already there, standing alone under the glow of a nearby lantern. The cool light reflected off her striking silver-blue armor, making her look almost ethereal in the twilight. Her presence, always so confident, seemed a little softer tonight, like a woman who was giving him space to think, not demanding anything. "Captain," she greeted him, her voice steady and calm. "I'm glad you came." Darius nodded in silence, unsure of what to say at first. There was so much he wanted to ask her, so many questions buzzing in his mind, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he just stood there, looking at her, searching for some sign that would help him decide what to do. Zalveris studied him for a moment, her violet eyes unreadable. Then, with a small smile, she stepped forward. "I know that you've been struggling with my offer. I understand. Making such a decision is not easy, but sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most important changes." Darius swallowed, looking down at the ground. He wanted to tell her that he had been thinking about it, that he had been fighting with himself over it, but he couldn't put his feelings into words. How could he explain what was happening inside his head? "You're right," he finally said, his voice rougher than he intended. "This is difficult. I've never been in a position like this before." Zalveris gave a small, knowing nod. "It's not easy for anyone to make a leap like this. I didn't expect you to have all the answers, but I do believe you have the courage to find them." "I don't know," Darius muttered. "I don't even know where to start." Zalveris reached out slowly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. It wasn't an act of comfort, but a gesture of understanding. She wasn't trying to push him, wasn't trying to force him into anything. Her touch was simply an offering, an invitation to take a step forward, if he was ready. "Start with what you know, Captain," she said softly. "Start with what you believe in. You've fought in wars, seen destruction, and felt the pain of loss. But you've also seen the strength of your people, the resilience of humanity. You protect not for your own glory, but because you care. That is a rare thing, Captain Kane, and it is something worth fighting for." Darius felt the weight of her words in a way he hadn't expected. He'd always been driven by duty, by a sense of obligation to protect those he loved, but he'd never considered that the strength of his convictions could be more than just the foundation of his soldier's life. Could it be enough to build something greater than war? Could it lead to peace between their worlds? "I never thought about it like that," Darius said quietly, looking up at her. "I've always just fought because I had to, because it was my job. But what you're saying, it's bigger than that, isn't it? It's about something more than just survival." Zalveris nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "It is. It's about creating a future where we no longer have to fight for survival, but can build something that benefits both our peoples, something that transcends the battles we fought, the hatred that has built up between us. It's about finding a way forward." Darius stood silently for a long moment, the weight of her words settling in his mind. He had always believed that fighting was the only way to protect what mattered. But now, for the first time, he could see that peace, real peace, was possible. It wouldn't come easy, but it could come if both sides were willing to make the effort. Finally, Darius spoke, his voice quieter than before. "And you think that we, humanity and your people, can actually do that? We can build something like that?" "I do," Zalvaris replied with a confidence that surprised him. "I believe it can be done, but not alone. It will take both of us, working together. It will take trust, understanding, and a willingness to learn from each other. And yes, it will take time. But I have faith in what we can achieve. I've seen the way you care about those around you, Captain. And that is the foundation of a strong future." Darius felt a stirring inside him, a quiet hope that he had been trying to suppress. He had spent so many years believing that fighting was the only way to make a difference. But Zalvaris was showing him something different. She was showing him that peace wasn't just about avoiding war. It was about forging a new path, one that didn't require destruction, but collaboration. For the first time, Darius felt a flicker of possibility in his chest. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he could help build something greater than he had ever imagined. "I don't have all the answers," he said slowly, "but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take the next step." Zalvaris smiled then, a smile that was both gentle and proud. "That's all I ask, Captain. That's all I ever needed to hear." For a moment, they just stood there, in the quiet of the night, each feeling the weight of their decision. It wasn't the end of a journey, but the beginning of something new, something uncertain, but full of potential. They didn't know where this path would lead, but they were both ready to take it, together. In that moment, Darius realized that he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a part of something bigger, something that could change the future. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to move forward. The days following Darius Kane's decision to consider Zalvaris' offer were filled with uncertainty. He had stepped into unknown territory, both literally and metaphorically. The future, once clear in his mind, was now a landscape full of possibilities and dangers. Every decision, every word spoken, seemed to carry weight. The war between humans and the alien species had raged for years, and here he was, standing at the precipice of something entirely new. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. As the days wore on, Darius found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. Could he really leave the life he had built as a soldier? Could he, a man who had spent years fighting, find peace? Could his actions really help unite two worlds that had been at odds for so long? The questions consumed him, pulling him in different directions. Zalvaris, too, was feeling the pressure. She had always known that offering him a chance to marry her was a bold and risky move. It was a proposal that went beyond politics, beyond mere diplomacy. It was a chance to change the future of their people. She had put her faith in Darius, believing that he had the strength to take the next step, to be a part of something greater. But now, as the days passed, she too began to feel the strain. The weight of her responsibility was heavier than ever. It was late one evening when Darius received a message from Zalvaris. She had requested a meeting at the same clearing where they had spoken before. The message was brief but clear. "We need to talk, Captain. Please, meet me tonight." Darius hesitated as he read the words. A part of him wanted to ignore the message, to retreat back into the comfort of his routine. But he knew that wasn't an option. His life had already been changed by this woman and the proposal she had made. Whether he liked it or not, this was something he had to face. As he made his way to the clearing, the evening air was cooler than usual. The stars above seemed to shine brighter tonight, as if they too were watching the crossroads Darius now stood at. His boots crunched against the dry earth as he walked, each step heavier than the last. The feeling of uncertainty gnawed at him, but he kept moving forward, toward what he knew would be a defining moment. When he reached the clearing, Zolvarus was already there, standing alone. The lantern light cast a soft glow around her, making her seem almost otherworldly. Her silver-blue armor gleamed faintly in the dim light, and her expression was unreadable, as it had been during their earlier conversations. There was no hint of warmth, no sign of the softness he had seen before. Instead, there was something more resolute in her posture, something that told him this meeting would be different. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Thank you for coming." Darius nodded in acknowledgement, though he didn't speak at first. He studied her carefully, noting the tension in her stance, the tightness in her jaw. Something was different about her tonight. It was as if the weight of their previous conversation had pushed them both to a breaking point. "I wanted to meet with you to discuss where we stand," Zolvarus continued, her eyes meeting his. "I need to know where you are in your decision. Our people need to know what you've decided." She paused, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. "I have to be honest with you, Captain. I cannot keep waiting forever. This proposal, this alliance, cannot be delayed any longer. If you are not willing to take this step, we will have to move forward without you." The finality in her voice hit Darius harder than he expected. She had always been patient with him, always willing to give him time to think. But now it seemed that the time for thinking was running out. She had made her position clear. She couldn't wait forever. I don't know if I can do this," Darius said, his voice low and uncertain. "I don't know if I'm ready to leave everything I've known. I've spent my whole life as a soldier. This life, this war, it's what I understand. It's what I'm good at." Zolvarus took a step closer, her eyes softening for a moment. "I know it's not easy. I know that this is a huge change for you. But Captain, you are more than just a soldier. I see it in you. I believe in you. You have the power to change the future, not just for yourself, but for your people as well. I cannot do this alone. We need each other." Darius felt his chest tighten at her words. He could see the sincerity in her eyes, the trust she had placed in him. She believed in him, maybe more than he believed in himself. But how could he live up to that belief? How could he ever truly be the man she needed him to be? Zolvarus reached out slowly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. It wasn't an act of comfort, but a gesture of understanding. She wasn't trying to push him, wasn't trying to force him into anything. Her touch was simply an offering, an invitation to take a step forward, if he was ready. "Start with what you know, Captain," she said softly. "Start with what you believe in. You've fought in wars, seen destruction, and felt the pain of loss. But you've also seen the strength of your people, the resilience of humanity. You protect not for your own glory, but because you care. That is a rare thing, Captain Kane, and it is something worth fighting for." Darius felt the weight of her words in a way he hadn't expected. He'd always been driven by duty, by a sense of obligation to protect those he loved. But he'd never considered that the strength of his convictions could be more than just the foundation of his soldier's life. Could it be enough to build something greater than war? Could it lead to peace between their worlds? "I never thought about it like that," Darius said quietly, looking up at her. "I've always just fought because I had to, because it was my job. But what you're saying, it's bigger than that, isn't it? It's about something more than just survival." Zolvarus nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "It is. It's about creating a future where we no longer have to fight for survival, but can build something that benefits both our peoples, something that transcends the battles we fought, the hatred that has built up between us. It's about finding a way forward." Darius stood silently for a long moment, the weight of her words settling in his mind. He had always believed that fighting was the only way to protect what mattered. But now, for the first time, he could see that peace, real peace, was possible. It wouldn't come easy, but it could come if both sides were willing to make the effort. Finally, Darius spoke, his voice quieter than before. "And you think that we, humanity and your people, can actually do that? We can build something like that?" "I do," Zalveris replied with a confidence that surprised him. I believe it can be done, but not alone. It will take both of us, working together. It will take trust, understanding, and a willingness to learn from each other. And yes, it will take time. But I have faith in what we can achieve. I've seen the way you care about those around you, Captain. And that is the foundation of a strong future. Darius felt a stirring inside him, a quiet hope that he had been trying to suppress. He had spent so many years believing that fighting was the only way to make a difference. But Zalveris was showing him something different. She was showing him that peace wasn't just about avoiding war. It was about forging a new path, one that didn't require destruction, but collaboration. For the first time, Darius felt a flicker of possibility in his chest. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he could help build something greater than he had ever imagined. I don't have all the answers, he said slowly, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take the next step. Zalveris smiled then, a smile that was both gentle and proud. That's all I ask, Captain. That's all I ever needed to hear. For a moment, they just stood there in the quiet of the night, each feeling the weight of their decision. It wasn't the end of a journey, but the beginning of something new, something uncertain, but full of potential. They didn't know where this path would lead, but they were both ready to take it together. In that moment, Darius realized that he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a part of something bigger, something that could change the future. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to move forward. The days following Darius Kane's decision to consider Zalveris' offer were filled with uncertainty. He had stepped into unknown territory, both literally and metaphorically. The future, once clear in his mind, was now a landscape full of possibilities and dangers. Every decision, every word spoken, seemed to carry weight. The war between humans and the alien species had raged for years, and here he was, standing at the precipice of something entirely new. The thought was both exciting and terrifying.